what we want our culture to be, how we want to work together. And Ray, you made a really good comment about that earlier.
You know, collaboration, it seems to me, is something that we talk about a great deal, but I would imagine that anecdotally you could prove it's something that we don't actually practice as much as we talk about. I mean, we preach collaboration, but do we really practice it that much? And then when I look at some of the surveys that come out, one by Deloitte not too long ago that suggests that there's a great deal of talking about it, but it's something that we don't really achieve that often. I just wonder, I really wonder.
You know what, Russell, that is a really good point. And Mondelez International, you know, we're a $36 billion startup company. We ship cookie crackers and confectionery product, and we want to go to market with our partners differently. And you know, you can sit here and you can talk about collaboration and partnership and all those other things, but you know, what does that really mean? And so, you know, when we stepped back and we said we want to go to the market differently with our partners, we said let's look at vested outsourcing. So Kate Vitasek and her team, they've done a great job and they've been helping us out on this journey. And you know, vested outsourcing is really three different things. It's a mindset. So you totally have to change your culture, how you work with your partners from top to bottom. It's a methodology, and so what's great about it, your partners truly understand how to get there. So there's a manual, there's action plans, there's a process. So, you know, when you really say vested, people can relate to it. It gets you to a contract at the end where, you know, your partners can, you know what that contract's going to look like, and the buyer is getting something from the partnership. And then, you know, it really is a type of movement, as Kate would say. You know, it's your culture changing, it's a methodology, and, you know, you have a result that comes out of it. And I really consider that is where we're going to be going with collaboration, because we're looking for our partners on safety, service, cost, and we have to have the best of the best.
It's interesting, you know, y'all talk about the surveys and do we really practice it? And the vested program really kind of takes it from being an aspirational goal to giving you an intentional way of actually achieving that goal, where, you know, there's a lot of talk, and this helps, you know, move you along that spectrum in a very structured way. You know, I think back, we did a CAT survey, which is kind of one of those events where, you know, we all contributed input and talked about, you know, how the relationship was structured, how we felt about it, how effective it was. And to me, that was very liberating, where, you know, you sat there and it was like, you know, all of a sudden we just lifted a curtain. And, you know, and all those things that you thought, or, you know, maybe in a polite environment you didn't want to talk about, this really gave you the form to start building that relationship. Don't you think so?
Absolutely. We talked about things that we hadn't had the opportunity or the forum to talk about in the past. We talked about compatibility, we talked about trust, and we talked about the way we interact with each other.
Yeah, what was interesting to me is really the series of questions that we all went through. We answered them, you answered them, we all answered those collectively, right? And how others perceive you, how you perceived others, what was important to the business. In many of those cases, they were the same, but in some of those cases, they were different. And it really, quite frankly, took a level of trust for us to sit there and talk through each one of those, which when you say about a culture of collaboration, it truly was, right? It wasn't just a buzzword. We were literally working through it. And
a lot of the business things were all, you're aligned. You know, you kind of take something, you know, they're not going to change. You want to do a good job. You want to get good results. But, you know, being effective, and it's the relationship. It's how are we interacting, the qualitative aspect that sometimes get in the way, and you don't sometimes realize that, you know. And this was that first kind of step of let's have that discussion, and boom, it put that foundation. And so I think, you know, just doing that, you can sit back and say, okay, you know what? It's okay to pick up the phone and say, I got an issue. You know, we're working our way through the process, but you know what? It kind of opened up that communication process to where, you know, it's different than it was. And you kind of felt that after that session, and we've hopefully you feel we've been building on that.
Absolutely. When you say compelling as well, you know, I think there's an additional step here, right? It's 3 suppliers and Mondelez, right? And so I think, you know, typically it's a 1-to-1 relationship. And this one, it's a 1-to-3 relationship. And essentially, we have to be one to make it 1-to-1, right? So that was another, I'm even going to call it a hurdle, because it is something that we had to go into a bit cautiously and kind of work through. But where we've got at this point definitely has been successful, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the CAT was also, it was just a great benchmark for us to consciously assess where we stood in our relationships today and say, okay, here's where we are. And I choose to continue trusting and to continue building that trust as we move forward and down the rest of our vested journey. And I think the next step that we took to build off of that, Kat, was also really important. So we took that benchmark of how's our relationship, and then we moved into what's called in the vested language our statement of intent, but it was really us defining and documenting what we want our culture to be, how we want to work together. And Ray, you made a really good comment about that earlier.
Yeah, and I was actually went back and read the statement of intent. I've got a leadership stakeholder kind of session with my team later on this week. And so I looked at it, and the thing that really stuck out was it's obvious, but it was missing. Okay, if you think about how relationships work, you think about, you know, the candor, the communication, let's make the tough choices, have the good dialogue, you know, that's all the things you'd expect in a relationship. But, you know, sometimes, you know, things get clouded, things get lost, or you get focused on only cost or price and not on the outcomes of actually serving the customer and delivering your goods to market in a way that, you know, really builds your business. That's good for all of our business. So, you know, and that was kind of like, you know, I'm going to use that line later on, obvious but missing. I think that you know, is, you know, for me.
Absolutely. And I think the statement of intent, I don't know if you agree, I think it did three main things for us. The first was the obvious one, which is that we actually had to stop and define the ways that we wanted to interact together, how we wanted to behave. And when I say we, I mean, that was an exercise we hadn't done with Ryder or Schenker in the past. It might have been, we might have had components of it individually in our conversations with you, but it was a chance for us to form one team, and our voices, I think, were all heard in that process. So it literally gave us a one-page document that we could then take back to our teams to accomplish the second thing I think it did for us, which was it gave us a tool to be able to educate the rest of our teams. Right. So we all have a huge vested team of 30 people or so with all of us, but that's only a fraction of who's supporting your business.
Well, Shelly, that was a point I wanted to make. It's been amazing to watch how you all have taken it to your teams. You've taught your teams. So, you know, you're coming in, we're all working on it together, and then you're taking it to your teams, you're educating your teams. So we all know when you teach, when you go and teach something, you only get better at it. And so your teams were seeing it from the ground up with our folks, and, you know, they're working together, they're working from the heart, and they really feel like there's a true difference that's happening. And so it's been an awesome thing to watch.
Yeah, and Ray, you said compelling, right? And that compelling, you and Shelly, you know, you're talking about 30, 35 people in a room. Typically, you go to a customer and you're in a project or some type of initiative, and there's, you know, 7 to 10 people in the room. To come to each one of these meetings, and what we've had, you know, multiple meetings, and there's 35 people from all reaches within the corporation. That says something to what you're doing, right? And the exercise we did with stakeholders in our company, having to go into it, not the 35 in the meeting, but talking with all the folks in our company, ensuring that they're on board with what we're trying to do. Very important in the process.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
A lot of energy in that session too, you know, and it was a real positive energy, and it kind of built on, you know, the collective intelligence, if you will, of all those, you know, folks that were there. You know, we did a desired outcomes roadmap, and you think about the product we came in with, and the collective, you know, kind of molding of that, and the product we came out with, a much better outcome than if you had tried to do that individually or didn't have the power of all the 3 providers and the customer in the room. You're really talking openly and candidly on what's important to the business.
And I think that's what the statement of intent is really doing, and the whole vested process. It's designed to help us bring out the best in each other, and that's what I'm really seeing. And the third thing that I really see as valuable output of the statement of intent is that it's a way for us to continue bringing the process to life. So as you're establishing the new culture and the way we want to behave together, it's new to people, and so it empowers us as a team with our own organizations, with each other, to say, I'm seeing something that is a little bit different than I think the path that we want to head down together, and help me understand how we can shift that to be aligned with our new culture. And I think that reinforcement's been really, really positive in helping us all bring our teams into our joint culture.
good point there. I think transcendency, right? You know, as people change roles, you know, individual relationships are important, but you know, it's really got to be sustaining and over time. So the statement of intent helps become transcendent, onboard new folks as folks, you know, grow through their careers. You know, we've got a benchmark. There's also a way to hold each other accountable. You know, we said we were going to do this, you know, and if you get that drift, you know, like, you know, hey, we're not there, you know, let's get back, or, you know, if we've moved, why have we moved? And you know what, is it still right to be where we are? And if it is, we can benchmark back. So I think two really valuable parts of that work.
Yeah, and as we were going through that statement of intent and the CAT assessment, you know, one of those important items was, you know, we were talking about the what and not the how, right? We weren't talking about exactly how are the vendors going to do this. It was Mondelez saying this is what we want, and really handing over the reins of the stagecoach to the vendors and letting us determine how to do that, right? We're the experts in the field of logistics. Mondelez is the experts in the production of their delicious foods. And so when two experts come together, it was very powerful, right? So it wasn't how, and we've even seen that, I think, in our facilities, right? Metrics have gone from, you know, 20, 25 specific metrics down to 8 metrics, meaning it comes down to trust, right? We trust that you're the expert. We trust that you're going to...
we're going to do our due diligence.
Absolutely.
Right, we're going to run a good shop. But you know what? You know, there's certain things that are internal, and you know, the client and us ought not be discussing. We ought to be looking at the future. Right. Okay, how do we drive this business forward? Not, okay, what happened on third shift? And so it's really is, you know, let's put the time and the effort where it needs to be to improve the business and focus on that forward look.
It's a conscious shift from managing the metrics to managing the business and taking Mondelez International where you want to go.
Yeah, we turned around and we said, you know, we're going to take the boxing gloves off, and, you know, we're going to let you do what you do well. And, you know, you have so many offerings. I mean, when we sat back and really listened to what our providers could provide us, you have so many offerings, from the lean, from the engineering services, from, you know, all these expertise, from transportation. And, you know, we wanted to step back and we tried to manage all of that internally. And, you know, we're not the experts at it. Mondelez International, we need to focus on what's core. And we need to take things out that are non-core and let, you know, outsource it and let the experts actually do the work. And, you know, that's why when we said we're going to partner with our partners and we want to do that in a certain way, and we said vested outsourcing is the way to go. And we know what we're going to get to. And we sit here at the table today and we know what we're going to get to because we're all getting there together.
And it's what we enjoy doing. We really are able to bring you the best value and the best solutions when our handcuffs are off. And I really see you taking advantage of that. And like I said earlier, bringing out the best in each of your partners by letting us do what each of us uniquely do best.
You know, going away from all that transactional stuff, you know, and now we're having discussions around innovation and, you know, what can we do to make the business better? And the most important thing is we're talking outside of the four walls now. It's not just about, I mean, we all, you know, you can run warehouses. That's, you know, that's what you do for a business. But we're talking outside of the four walls. What are things we need to do at Mondelez upstream, you know, to help the whole process? And so it's an amazing, you know, really journey to go through, and with our partners.
Yeah, and in the you know what, not the how, in our objectives, right? We're talking about, as you say, the end to end. So quite frankly, we're getting exposed to things that we may not have got exposed to before. That one helps us with our portion of the business, but also helps you with your portion of the business. What are those points in between that we can help with, right? Transition from one activity to the next activity. Yeah. That's been very liberating, I think, for all of us.
That's one of my favorite sentences, actually, in the statement of intent. Is there's a line that says, "We will jointly champion the change that adds value to the business," and that one really leaps out, and that's jointly across us as well as.
I'd like to just say something about this statement of intent. It's come up several times, and you know, oftentimes when we're covering stories, you look at contractual obligations that parties have, and of course it's stipulated in there that this, that, or the other is the role that you've got to play. But what I've been hearing here is that there are expectations that are laid out in this statement of intent, and all of the parties seem to have agreed that we're going to be all in. Yes. We're going to be all in, and as a result of that, that's going to enable the kind of collaboration, the kind of trust that has come up several times here. I mean, does that sound reasonable?
Russell, it does. And, you know, we actually had to start with a vision going into the statement of intent. And, you know, just the one-liner of our vision together as a team is one team, one purpose. So we're all here together. It's not about Exel. It's not about Ryder. It's not about Schenker. It's not about Mondelez International. It's about approaching it as one team and reaching success together. And so you're absolutely right. So our vision says it all. And, you know, we developed that together. And what was amazing out of, you know, even the statement of intent, we had the roadmap discussions. And we're all in the room, and you finally started looking around in the room, and you never defined who was with what company. We were all acting as one, we were all solving as one, and we're looking at desired outcomes as one. So we're going to get to, you know, one result with, you know, with 3 different partners, and we operate as one. And it's a pretty amazing process to see and watch that evolution.
Yeah. And during that evolution, you know, I would add that, you know, it is a process. We took steps along the way, and it's very important to hit every single one of those steps, right? You think you know how to go into a relationship, right? But yeah, it does help when you have kind of a roadmap that says, make sure you hit these items along the way, and that's what Vested brought to us. Not
to sound flippant, but the statement of intent is very intentional. Is to sit down and actually define that relationship. You know, because if we just rush to the T's and C's in the contract and let the purchasing folks and the selling folks, yeah, you can get that. You know, this really is how are we going to define how we're going to interact and what's important, and making sure that that's covered and that stays alive, and we don't let that drift away. You know, because you enter a relationship kind of enthusiastic, but you got to make sure it's sustainable. I think that gets us to that next level.
So that created the how we're going to behave, and then the desired outcomes gave us a very good format to see, well, what are we trying to achieve? What does success look like for Mondelez International? Where are we going? And so combining those two pieces of how are we going to interact and what are we going after, combined with the ability to take off those handcuffs and really be able to think creatively and bring innovation, has been, I think, some of the biggest successes of our path so far.
I think, you know, the desired outcome piece, and we're stretching what those results are or could be. You know, we looked at kind of the, okay, you know, do good, right? Run a good operation, deliver results. But then, you know, how do as you talk about, how do we look at the supply chain? How do you add bigger value? And how do you think about the connections in the interdependencies? And then how can you help influence that within your house? How can we as providers help provide a solution and look at a broader span? Because you know, hopefully, like you said, we can run a warehouse, but you know what? How do we help your supply chain and help make the whole thing more efficient end to end? And it's a very intentional way we spelled that out in those desired outcomes.
Absolutely.
You know, when we talk about desired outcomes and where things are going, I'm kind of curious about where exactly, phase-wise speaking, the relationship is, and where does it go next? What's the next phase of this relationship? How would you characterize that?
Yeah, so we're probably about, I'll say, you know, halfway to 3/4 of the way through the actual process of vested outsourcing. And, you know, where it actually goes to is a contract that we all can live with. So it will have desired outcomes that we all have built together that we'll actually work toward and will live with.
And we, you know, we've gotten through establishing what they are. We'll come through, and there's always kind of the commercial piece, you know, establishing a pricing model. It's win-win for both parties, and making sure that commercial structure allows that to happen, provides incentives and reward, you know, for delivering Mondelez's business, and for, you know, us making investments to help do that. And then we have, you know, we have a governance piece. So if we think about the statement of intent, okay, here's how we want to behave, and then designing a governance model that allows us to do that in a structured, intentional way, but then also that is effective, okay, and that, you know, it allows the partners to breathe, to really kind of, you know, perform in their space and not trip over one another. So that's still work we have to do as we go through the process. But I think, you know, given the runway we've had today, I mean, I'm real optimistic about getting through those other stages.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I would say, you know, and you're saying, you know, let's call it 70%. Even at this juncture, I fully expect that we're going to go all the way with vested. There's no doubt in my mind. But even if that process stopped right now at the 70%, the value we've got to this point with the relationship, how we're going to do business, is, I would say, twofold from a traditional agreement. I would say that right now. I hope you all agree, right? How we're working through it, how the teams are working through it. It's based on trust. It's genuine. It's not a buzzword. I said that before. It truly is a genuine approach, a personal focus on the business, right, between us.
Clearly everything is going great now, but let's be honest. In the beginning, when you first got into this relationship, surely there must have been some skepticism.
There was, and I think Cory Ann mentioned it earlier, and you in your opening comments about how strategic partnerships are often desired but not achieved, right? And so I know what made me a believer was the fact that Mondelez International was following a process, the process of vested. There is an actual manual that we are following. So it's more than a goal. It's a process that we're going through, and knowing that you're fully committed to the process and that we're each fully committed to the process, let us take that leap of faith together and say we know where we're going.
There's healthy skepticism in my organization. And, you know, we work through this, you know, some of the process, talking about stakeholder alignment and so forth. But I think the key is it's the proof is in kind of the pudding as you go forward daily, right? Yeah. You know, what are we doing? How are we reinforcing that? And how are we choosing to live that vision? Kind of the choose to trust, the choose to follow the process, and then, you know, call out when there's a miss, you know, and you have the freedom to do that, yes. and that be honest and say, you know what, there's an issue, it's not working, let's deal with it. So, you know, I think you build or you chip away at that skepticism as you go forward, yes. But it's on the parties to help do that.
And it's not just the freedom to do it, it's the expectation to do it. Yeah.
So you're talking about into the process. I mean, and it may sound like an odd analogy, but it's much like a blind date, right? You're not really sure what's going to occur on the blind date, but you may have some high hopes for it, right? And you go, and over time that develops, right? And from that, you know, it could be a marriage, right? But getting over that initial step of that blind date before it really turns into something that you can appreciate. So it does take some getting into that process. But once you're into it, you'll definitely see the value.
But what I'm hearing is that this seems to be an exception to the rule about collaboration being something that we talk about, but we don't engage in that much. In this case, what's not to like?